Welcome to the second of our talks for the Year of Faith, in which we consider this time the creeds themselves, the creeds of the Church, which we recite in the various liturgies of the Church, and which we use in our own prayer and in our own study. Most of us will be familiar with two creeds, and some of us perhaps with a third one, which I'll speak about a little at the end. But the two creeds that we know best are creeds which come from the faith of the early Church and which express the doctrine and practice of the Church right at the beginning of her life. The creed that we use perhaps most often and with which perhaps we are most familiar is the creed which is known as the Apostles' Creed. This creed comes down to us from the Church at Rome, and we have witnesses to it going right the way back to the 4th century. We're not sure whether it was written first in Latin or in Greek. The Roman Church used to use Greek before it used Latin. We know that because we still have a little remnant of that in the way we celebrate Mass, using the words in Greek, Kyrie eleison. But the creed of the Church, which we know as the Apostles' Creed, comes down to us from the earliest years of the Roman Church. And it is a creed which is intended for use for baptismal candidates. It is the baptismal creed of the Western Church. Used in question and answer form or recited, it is the creed that parents and godparents make on behalf of those who are to be baptized, and it is the one that adult candidates who are able to answer for themselves use as they are baptized. It's a short creed, but it contains all that we need to know about Christian doctrine for those who are about to enter into the mystery of baptism and to receive that sacramental grace at the beginning of their Christian lives. This is the creed that is common to all Christians of the Latin Church, and so, as a consequence, has passed into our own Anglican practice. And we use it also at morning and evening prayer. We recite it at those offices as an act of faith that enables us, by reciting our belief, to reaffirm our baptismal vow and to progress in the virtue of faith, ever deepening within us the things that we proclaim we believe. The second creed that will be most familiar to us is the one that we recite at the Eucharist. This is very commonly called the Nicene Creed and is associated with the great council whose anniversary we will be celebrating, the Council of Nicaea, the faith of the 318 fathers who gathered in the year 325 at the Council of Nicaea, just near Constantinople, which is now Istanbul in Turkey, and decided to proclaim their faith in the incarnation of the Son of God. This creed is a longer creed than the one that we are familiar with as the Apostles' Creed. And it's a longer creed because it contains phrases and statements that are intended to exclude the opinions of those who did not consider that Jesus Christ was truly God and truly man. We are familiar with the phrase, being of one substance or consubstantial with the Father from that creed. And those words are at the nub of what we proclaim when we recite the Nicene Creed, because they are designed to counter the heresy of Arius, who denied that Jesus Christ was truly God and truly man. The creed as we recite it now is not exactly the same words as were used by the fathers at Nicaea. The form in which we use it was in fact drawn up probably, we think, at the Council of Constantinople in the year 381, because it contains more teaching about the Holy Spirit than the original Nicene Creed. And we have it for the first time preserved in documentary form in the minutes of the Council of Chalcedon, which met at 451. But we also know that from that time onwards, in various places, both in the East and in the West, this creed was the one that was used at the Eucharist. It was used by the year 1000 nearly everywhere in East and West, except, funnily enough, in the city of Rome, because the popes considered that their orthodoxy did not need to be improved by reciting the creed at Mass. And it wasn't until the year 1012 that the Holy Roman Emperor insisted to the Pope that the creed was inserted into the Roman Mass. However, we now have a universal creed in the creed that we use at Mass, with one exception to do with the way in which the Spirit proceeds from the Father and the Son. We use the same words and the same phrases as Christians East and West. It is our common creed. And so in reciting it and using it, we are expressing our fundamental unity in our baptismal and Eucharistic faith with our brothers and sisters of the Latin Church and of the Orthodox churches. The third creed, which we come across from time to time, which is used in the Book of Common Prayer at morning prayer on certain feast days, is the Athanasian Creed. This creed is a bit of an enigma. It's not very familiar to us because we don't say it very often, and in some churches it's not used at all. But it would seem to be a creed that was drawn up in Gaul, what is now France, at some point at the beginning of the 5th century, in order to exclude those who denied the doctrine of the Trinity. It's been interesting to see that in the Ordinariate's new office book, the Creed of St. Athanasius has been restored to use regularly on those same feast days. So 3 creeds, but one faith. 3 creeds, 3 different ways of expressing the same faith in God, who is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and in the incarnation of his Son, Jesus Christ, who is true God and true man.